Hi and welcome. It's great to have you join me. Today I am being joined by one of my ex-colleagues, Philip Hunt, and we're going to be having a bit of a chat about his new book, Leadership and Me. When you look at Philip's resume, it is incredibly impressive. He began his career in the bank and then radio, and then he went to join one of Australia's largest aid organisations, World Vision. He joined the team in their communications department, and then he went on to serve various roles in various locations around the world. Most notably, he became CEO of World Vision in Hong Kong. He actually established that office and then later became CEO of World Vision Australia. He's been the Vice President for the Middle East and Eastern European region of World Vision International, and he also served at Deakin University Student Association and took on the role of Chief Executive of Vic Relief Food Bank. Quite an amazing career, and I had the pleasure of working alongside him the last 2 years as he joined Bayside Church in the position of General Manager and now has gone into retirement. And so I look forward to having a chat with him today, all about his new book, Leadership and Me. So without further ado, I'm going to have Philip join me. Hello, congratulations on your new book, Philip.
Hello, Sandra. Thank you very much. It's lovely to talk to you again and to see you.
Yeah, exactly right. And I love this book. I was thinking about when this book, the reasons I grew up in my teenage years were in the 90s and 80s. And 40-hour famine was very much a household thing that we would do. And that's largely because of you and your team.
Well, yes, me and one or two others. But yes, I was there at the very beginnings of the 40-hour famine in Australia. And we tried it in a couple of states and it didn't work very well. And then we said, I think I said the problem here is an economy of scale, that if we'd taken it national, it would have worked as in fundraising terms. The return on investment would have been there. And so we did it, and that's what happened. Malcolm Fraser was Prime Minister, and he was prepared to endorse it, which was surprising and wonderful. And so it took off, and it's been really influential, I think, on generations of Australian young people since. And you've seen people who found their appreciation of the world because of that experience, and they've gone on to do great things.
Well, that's how I became well acquainted with World Vision, was because of 40-hour famine. But we were jumping ahead, right? So I want to go back a little bit right at the beginning, because what's lovely about this book that I found that was, it really talks about your whole career progression. And I found it very honest. Like you didn't shy away from talking about the challenges in various positions and all the rest. But if we go right back to the beginning, you mentioned the influence that one particular person had on your life, and that was Dr. Lou Bourne, and he mentored you in secondary school camps, and you almost describe it as a boot camp for upcoming managers and leaders. So can you tell me a little bit about what he instilled in you at a really young age?
Well, Lou was an exceptional person. He only passed away recently in his 90s. He was director of Christian education for the Methodist Church in Queensland, and he had an amazing ability to cast a vision and get people excited about it in a way that it felt like you'd taken on what the vision was. So you kind of borrowed his vision and he gave it away to you. And so there was all this infectious enthusiasm about how he worked. And the secondary school camp movement at that time, I'm talking about the 60s or the 1960s, was 2 weeks in August. There were two camps, 1 week and then next week. And there were like 600 campers came along to Southport on the Gold Coast. There was a facility there that was owned by the church, and the program was phenomenal. It was complex. There were all kinds of OH and S issues as well that you had to deal with. Teenagers all together, so getting the control systems right, feeding them, having a program that was exciting, sporty, a whole range of things. So it was very complicated, and yet it was all done basically with Lou, maybe one other staff member, and volunteers. And I was one of those volunteers. But one year I was a camper. The next year I was a leader of a team of like 5 or 10, about 5 to 10 campers. So I was a leader. And then the next year I was a staff member responsible for some aspect of the program. And I think I was there 4 or 5 years in a row. And it was just an amazing learning experience. I learned so much about how to organize an event. And that set me up well for life in a way.
And in a way, also managing people, because you were overseeing people at such a young age.
Yes. Well, I started, I guess, at about 15. So like when I was in grade 10 or something like that. Yes, so yeah, we were taking on responsibility early, but because there were so many people doing it, we would run the program, and then when everybody went to bed, most of the leaders would meet together for another hour, and we'd have a devotional time, some prayer, but also we'd talk about how it went today and what needed to be fixed and so on. Yeah, so I write a bit about that and how that set me up in a sense for a life of management first and then leadership later.
It's extraordinary, and it's lovely to see how later on Lou sort of then became involved in World Vision, and then became your pastor at one point.
Exactly. We didn't. That wasn't planned. That's just part of the serendipity of living in Christian communities one way or another. Yes, we were looking for somebody to represent sort of the Queensland on the board of World Vision, and Harold Henderson, who was the CEO of World Vision at that time, I was a member of staff, said, did I know people? And of course I said I knew Lou, and Harold knew of Lou. So we invited him and he came. But even before that, when I was working in radio, he was doing a night program on the Brisbane radio station where I was working. I was doing afternoon shift. He was doing a talkback thing at 10 o'clock at night. So our lives kept interacting. Then when we were going to Doncaster Church of Christ some years later, he was, when I was actually CEO of World Vision, he was the minister there. And so we reconnected again. Yeah, so that was delightful. Regrettably, because of COVID, I couldn't go to his funeral. But I wrote a little eulogy just really for the family, and they blessed me by using that eulogy on the order of service. So I was just delighted that I was able to do that and make that contribution to the family.
Fantastic. And so can you just really briefly just say, let me know a little bit about how important it is to have those mentors, not just, I guess, when you're young, but all the way through your working career?
Yeah, there's nothing more encouraging for a young person to find adults who will believe in you. And one hopes one gets that from one's parents, and I did. My parents believed in me, and were very, very supportive. But to find somebody who you admired because you saw them, the sort of person you might put on a pedestal, and then discover that they were absolutely human and that they were caring and they would take time with you. And he was, nowadays the idea that older men would take interest in younger people, some people think that's all a bit creepy nowadays because of the problem with sexual abuse and so on. In my day, we, in the 60s, that was not in our frame of reference, sadly, of course. So that's the dark side of that. But the light side of that is that when the relationship is of the best kind, and this was with Lou, it gave me a sense that, well, he was a person who, he didn't really have to look out for me or care about me, and yet he did. And so as somebody does that, you want to please them, you want to do well for them, and it's enormously encouraging.
Yeah, fantastic. So your story very much charts your career progression from working at a bank to radio and then joining World Vision. And you lived in various Australian cities in that time, and you lived overseas in Hong Kong and Vienna. And I guess what really strikes me is that not only did you hold these incredible, successful roles, but you also seem to have a very successful family life. You have 3 children, and you managed to move across to different continents. I'm just curious because often, the focus is on one and the other slips. How did you manage to do that?
Well, I wouldn't claim that we did it perfectly well. I think the first thing is that a man should marry well, and thankfully I really did. Judy has been, the love of my life now for 53 years. So maybe a little more because I was in love with her before we got married. And she's a natural homemaker. She always wanted to have children and have them around. So that part was just a blessing for the relationship. On the other hand, she thought she was not the sort of person who wanted to travel the world. She's a little more anxious than I am about most things, and that's a good. What would you say? That tempers my enthusiasm for doing things. I have to consider whether there's some wisdom in that. There's some wisdom in anxiety. It might be worth thinking about before you rush into that kind of thing. So that's been a good balance in our lives. So starting with that, when a partnership in marriage works, that's great. I think I don't know how well we did it, to be honest, because there are great strains when you move overseas, and not everything was perfect, of course.
No.
The kids moving in and out of schools and in and out of cultures was always a challenge. When we went to Vienna, we just had Richard, our youngest, with us. He was 8 at the time, and he was bullied in the school there, and it was a difficult time for him. But even that's a maturing experience. And when you came back to Australia and you grew another half a metre higher, bullying wasn't a problem for him anymore, but he knew what it looked like from the other side. So I think it helped him to mature.
But you seem like a close-knit family, even though they might be in different parts of the world.
Yeah, you come. I tried to do some things like when I went overseas, I would still communicate with the family. It was only by fax in the early days, but later, of course, with modern technology, it's much easier these days to keep in communication. You couldn't even telephone for most of my career with World Vision Australia from overseas very easily or cheaply. When we were in Vienna, I tried not to be away for the weekends, which I could do generally. I could travel during the week to the 10 places where World Vision had ministry across Eastern Europe and in the Middle East. To find the ways to get the balance right. It's not easy, but you've got to have it top of mind. And I have to say, I was lucky enough to work for an organisation, and I mean World Vision, that cared about it. That never, if you wanted to take family time, that was not questioned.
Yes, the values of the organisation that you work with sort of married with your own values, I guess, and that helps. I guess if someone joins an organisation that doesn't value family life, then that would suffer in some way too, or there'd be a conflict.
Yes. Well, we see some organisations that seem to own their employees, and they expect you to work to death.
Yes.
And often it's a two-edged sword, because often the work is so terrific you want to work to death,
Yeah.
You're enjoying it so much, but it's really damaging. I've seen that with World Vision people too, who are loving their work so much that they're not loving their family enough. So you've got to get that right.
Yeah, fantastic. So you speak about many people that you worked under, whose leadership you were under, obviously, and you've already mentioned Harold Henderson, and then there was David Long in the beginning, and there's others probably from radio, right across your career, lots of people that you worked under. Whose leadership style influenced you the most?
Well, some influenced me because I didn't like their leadership style.
And that's valid.
And I do tell a story about a manager at a radio station who actually
Yeah.
carved
I love
up a
that.
record that he didn't like me playing, and never commented on it. It was really strange. But there was another radio manager who took me aside and said that he thought I was doing really well, and that I had a great deal of talent and all this sort of thing. I was thinking, oh, this is going well. And then he said, but, I'm disappointed in you. Well, having set me up in that way, and obviously it was a technique, but it was a good technique to say, you're better than this, and I expect you to do better. I thought I really learned from that experience, because he was right. I hadn't been concentrating, I hadn't been giving what I could. And so that sort of thing. I often say to people that the best person I ever worked for was Hal Barber, who was an ex-military general, I think. He'd been responsible for the American part of the Berlin after the Second World War, and he was a colonel. Sorry, not a general, a colonel. And I was being a military man. I was kind of surprised to find how good he was as a leader of men. I was surprised because I thought he would be authoritarian, military man. But he was, well, he could be if he needed to be. Yes, he could be if he needed to be. But in my case, this is when I was managing Hong Kong, setting up a new World Vision office, and he gave me so much encouragement. Obviously felt that I could do the job. He was always ready for a conversation if I needed it. I could call him or send him a fax from Hong Kong, and he would respond and give me time. So I enjoyed that relationship. Whether he was the best manager, best leader manager I ever had, I don't know. Though I've had a few, so more good ones than bad ones.
Open dialogue that sort of, you mentioned in your book how that open door policy is really important. That approachability of a leader or a manager is really key. And I have witnessed that in your own leadership style as well, just being available. That obviously was an influence that Hal probably gave you.
Yes. Well, he and others. Harold Henderson was similar. He was always accessible. Yeah, I'm a 5 in the Enneagram. Okay. And so this doesn't come naturally to me. What I suppose the thing is that I realized it was important, so I worked on it.
Yes.
I would consciously, when I arrived in the office, walk around the office. It got to be such a habit that it began to become natural. Now, if you know anything about the Enneagram, which you do, you'll know that 5s are naturally introverted and like to sit and ponder things in their own office without any interruption. That's my safe place, and I like to do that. But if you consciously, someone once told me, just because you're left-handed doesn't mean you can't use your left hand, or you can develop your left hand. Of course you can. And I think that's what I discovered. The more I tried to do the things that were less natural, less easy, the easier they became.
Yeah, great. Now you talk about once you brought the family back home to Australia, you left Hong Kong, you established that office, and I loved reading how you appointed someone and they just weren't a people person. So you appointed the wrong person and then quickly found that out and then reappointed somebody else. And
it was more about my inability to select people at that time. But anyway, I learned about that.
Well, everyone's been in that place where the resume looks really impressive, but then, do they connect with the team? Do they, have those people skills that are so necessary? But you came back.
Happened at Bayside, did it?
Oh, I'm sure not. Oh, no. We've all been there. But you took up a role which I guess, reading your book, it was quite a challenging role in the sense it was crafted for you, but you weren't managing people as you were used to in Hong Kong, and that role was the Director of Strategic Planning and Executive Team Leader. That's a big title.
Yes, well, it was like one of those things, the bigger the title, the more meaningless it is, probably. The
Right.
problem with this was that it was designed to be a first among equals arrangement,
Yes.
where the management team, the executive group, didn't report to me, but was supposed to be managed by them, by me. Now, that's okay. I could manage it, but I couldn't lead it. And that's where my expectation and the organisation's positioning of me when I came back from Hong Kong to World Vision Australia were not in alignment. And because I had not communicated sufficiently well my desire to do more leadership, and perhaps because I couldn't articulate it, I probably hadn't really thought it out. But when it was absent, the opportunity was absent, it became really quite a depressing experience for me.
Well, it seems contrary to me to manage something, but you can't lead it. So does a role like that even work in your experience?
Well, yes, to some extent. It depends on a person's comfort with complexity, I think. If you're comfortable with if you're the person that wants to file documents, right? If you get joy out of filing documents, that suggests, and that's where you really feel comfortable. And then when someone says, could you help me design a fundraising campaign on this computer, and you think, oh, it's too complicated for me. I really just wanted to point me at the filing cabinet.
Yeah.
Well, there's a level of complexity that people are capable of handling, and that doesn't mean that they're stupid or not. I mean, the people who do craft work are handling a level of complexity that might be routine. You're following a pattern, but great beauty is created from those kinds of things. So from that kind of activity. So the problem here was that if the system is in place and it's running, you can manage it. That's what management is. It's about making things that you've already designed and that they're operating, making them work, and you manage that by making sure that it performs properly and you understand the systems. If it breaks, you know where to fix it, and so on. It's like fixing a car. The car's already built and designed. If the wheels fall off, you put the wheels back on, that kind of thing. That's management. But leadership is about, what's the next car look like?
Yes, great analogy.
When we build this next car, is it going to be electrically powered, or does it have to have more performance or more safety features? That's what leadership is about. It's about taking the organisation in a future direction.
And that's a great way to describe it. And I guess not everybody who gets, mistakes can be made when people think that just because you're a great manager, you can step into being a great leader. Some people just don't have that gifting, I guess.
Yes, yeah, it is gifting. And I discovered later, it's not in this book, but I discovered where my level was. So I was not going to be Nelson Mandela or Barack Obama or these people who have visions for, international visions. That's not my capability. But I did have sufficient capability to move an organisation in new directions. And I did that after World Vision in the following decade. A bit less so at Bayside because that was a different situation. It wasn't what I was asked to do. Yeah.
You were known for getting things done, according to
yeah.
And
yeah, Judy.
Judy,
Philip gets it done. That's probably true.
That's great. So what would you say to people who do transition from, even from an operational to a managerial role or managerial to a leadership role? Is there any advice that you would give people when you're making those transitions to, I guess, different roles that have different requirements? How do you discern whether you've got that capability?
Well, I think the first thing that will tell you is a level of dissatisfaction about what you're doing now. In other words, you keep seeing opportunities that you wish the organisation would take. However, so that discomfort is an indication that you probably should go to look for the next step up the hierarchy, if you think in that term. I suppose the alternative is, if you're really comfortable and enjoying your work, you're probably at the right level. There's a whole theoretical system around this called stratified systems theory by a Canadian writer, Elliot Jacques, and that describes this idea. If you're in a flow, if everything just seems to be flowing along well, you're probably at the right level. And you've probably heard that expression that people rise to their level of incompetence.
Yes.
So that's the other side of the coin, that people. And if I were to be honest, I would say that when I went to manage the region, I was pushing the boundaries of my capability, because I found it more difficult than I imagined. Not just a little organizational complexity, it was now 10 different countries, 10 different cultures, 10 different multiple programs, 1,000 staff. And although I think I did okay, I realized that's about all you're capable of doing, and maybe a little less would be better for your health.
Yeah, it's interesting, because there is that biblical principle, a person who's a leader of 10 or leader of 100 or a leader of so on, and it's recognizing, okay, what is my absolute capacity? And it's only as you step into these roles that you start to realize, okay, I might be out of my depth here, and you don't really know that until you kind of step into it.
Well, there were people who would say, well, are you going to be president of World Vision International? And, by the time that was, less than a remote possibility, because I was a vice president. But by the time I was vice president, I would say, no, that's definitely not for me.
Yeah, you kind of realize that. Just really quickly, you would have seen through your working career a lot of technological change. Heaps. I mean, you even talked about faxes. I did work when we used to have fax machines. I started my career with fax machines and then went to email.
Right. They must have been a very backward office. I mean, you know what you mean in this century when you were 15.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, very good, Philip. But I mean, apart from all the changes, because change happens all the time, in your opinion, what doesn't change when it comes to leadership and I guess management?
Well, I think the keys to leadership don't change. That's a part of human. Read the Bible about the leaders that were good and bad and did good things and didn't do such good things, but still managed, despite their humanity, to make things change. Look at the way Jesus led, for example. Very different to many. More, I was going to say more human, but he was fully human, but you get my gist. Perhaps we should say less godly. I think the leadership doesn't change. I think we understand it better and we can put frameworks around it. I was in a Zoom conference earlier this week, Christian Management Association, and there was a person who's written a new book where he talks about 4 kinds of leadership and the way in which that happens, and it's very familiar. It's new language about the same things, I think. So I don't think that does change. I think leadership is a human trait that has been around for a long while.
Okay, cool. Can you talk, just share what were some of the highlights of being the CEO of World Vision, particularly Australia, the Australia office?
Well, it was a great time to be alive in an organisation at the time, because it was growing so fast. And I joined it when it had I think it turned over about $3 million that year. And by the time I left, it was pushing $100 million. And that was when I left World Vision Australia. And that was, about 20 years. So in 2 decades, it went from $3 million to $100 million. And of course, now it's much bigger. That's one way of measuring it. And it went from 25 staff to 400.
Yeah.
So that it was just the excitement of growth. Now, we didn't grow every year. We had a fantastic growth in '85 when the whole Ethiopian famine and Live Aid and all that sort of thing. And we had a slowdown the next year because we had a flush of new donors who came in 1 year, and they mostly didn't come back until there was another big, another big Live Aid kind of thing. So that's the predominant thing. That was the other thing. This isn't just occurs to me now, is that it was wonderful to be working for an organisation that was Christian, that had Christian values, that was seeking to do something that was delivering the kingdom of God to some people, and there was so much enthusiasm around that, and that that people would, once they caught the vision, and often it was because they had already been involved through the 40-hour famine or something like that, they really wanted to commit themselves to it. So it was, I wouldn't say it was easy, but there was a kind of plus factor there in getting an enthusiastic team to get the job done. That is not always there if you're making washing machines. Know that but God bless people who do make washing machines, but I find them a bit less exciting than changing the world.
Oh, look, I know what you mean. I remember working for a public relations agency, and my clients would be things like ice cream and all sorts of different things, consumer goods that we would be promoting, and there was nothing wrong with them because they're all good things. But when you work on something that really is instilled with your values, and I remember that transition from working from that to working at Bayside Church, there's just this flow. There's just such a great sense of satisfaction when you're working on something that really is in line with what you believe in.
I think the metaphor of flow is really important. You mentioned it again, and that's right. If you have something that's delivering what is important within your value system, then that's you're going to stick to it, and you're going to do it well. You're going to put your whole heart into it.
Yeah, not that there's anything wrong with ice cream. I love ice cream, but yeah.
I have it regularly.
So, just talking about, you worked at World Vision for 24 years, and I'm not going to give away all the things that took place in that time. People need to get the book, Leadership and Me, everybody. But I want to just talk about, fabulous. I want to talk about the challenges of career transitions, particularly. Just as one of the last questions here today. There can be challenging times when you go through career transitions, or, particularly from organisation to organisation. And I can tell from the book that they were challenging times for you, but also times of great growth, personal growth. And so can you just tell us a little bit about the key learnings of those times for you?
Well, one is hang in there. Don't make any rash decisions. Keep doing the job and look for opportunities that come along afterwards. That would be the main takeaway from my time as executive team leader before I was offered the CEO role. I think God put a few things in place that made that happen, because I wasn't necessarily the only person who could have done that job, but the planets aligned. That's one thing. But after I left World Vision, and that's not in the book, except briefly at the end, I just described what I did later. I had to decide, was there another organisation that I wanted to lead that was bigger than World Vision in the not-for-profit area? No, I'd done that. What would I do next? Yes, and I realised also that perhaps I'd pushed the limits of my strategic capability in the Middle East and Eastern Europe role. And so I had a two-year experience of doing some management consulting, which was really just trying to survive without a regular income after I'd left work. And during that time, I reframed who I was. I had to see, well, what can you do now? And I realized I could apply what I had learned in these other, perhaps larger roles into a smaller context. And that's what happened at the Deakin University Student Association. It was a $14 million organisation, still substantial, still
absolutely
a lot of stuff to do. But it was in terrible trouble. And so I was able to use what my management knowledge and so on to turn it around, and twice actually, because we got it turned around once, and then John Howard decided to change the way that student associations could be funded, and so we had to turn it around again. But we did that successfully. And then I was at what is now Food Bank Victoria, and it was a similar turnaround position. And that's when I retired for the first time before Rob Buckingham said, come here for a couple of years.
Yay. Fantastic. Oh, that's really good. I think it's also a sign that sometimes there might be a waiting period, and in the waiting period, it might feel really uncomfortable trying to work out what is that step.
Yes, I remember saying in that time after I left World Vision with some really good friends, we were in their lounge room, and I said, I may never have a full-time job again. And I was really quite depressed about that. I was like 52 years of age.
Yeah.
And because they were very encouraging. Oh no, you'll be right, Philip. You something will come along. I don't think I believed it, but that's what you do. You hang in there, and God is faithful.
Yeah, I've seen that happen quite a few times for people who, particularly in their 50s. A role might end, and it's just really confronting. It's trying to work out, okay, well, what is next? Hopefully, I'm not done. That kind of thing. It's a reality, and it is. It's being faithful to know that God isn't done yet, and you certainly weren't done yet.
Oh, that's right. And it's also personally, you have to say, do I reframe the contribution I can make?
Yeah.
It's not an ascent towards glory sort of thing, the way you become more and more higher levels and so on. Some people it is, but for most people it isn't. And so you settle and say, well, what can I do? And I can do this. Well, that's what I'll concentrate on now, and it's very rewarding. So now I'm retired. And what am I doing? Well, I've picked up the bass guitar again. I'm getting much better at it week by week. So that was something that I was developing before I was whisked off to Melbourne, and I really enjoyed that. And there might be another book in me which takes this journey on, because the chapter, especially in the Middle East and East Europe, was quite interesting experience. I may write it. Whether I'll publish it's another question. We'll see.
Okay, fantastic. So, Leadership and Me, where can people get it?
Everywhere that books are sold. You can get it at Koorong, I know. You can buy it from Amazon.
Yep. Put it there.
Booktopia has it. The Book Depository in Britain has it. So, yeah, Booktopia, Amazon in Australia. I think the cheapest place you can buy it is Booktopia.
Okay, so everyone get onto Booktopia, order your copy of Leadership and Me by Philip Hunt, and lots of great stuff in there. I just love your candid humour, your dry sense of humour, all your little analogies are just, all whisked through here, and some great people that you've worked with. And so, Philip, thank you for your time today and for sharing a little bit about your story.
I appreciate your interest, and also I appreciate you.
Likewise. Have a great day.
Thank you.
See you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.